Yeah, want to say welcome to everyone who joined on the call, parents, folks who just got out of work, and they're joining to hear to Kamilah's story. Like I said, she's a very special guest. Ruben, do you want to introduce her?
Yes. So Kamilah is someone that, first of all, is one of my favorite people. We've been trying to get her on the podcast for a very long time. She's very busy.
True. 2019, this is the year.
2019 is going down. We're getting the exclusive right now. How many people have heard of Black Girls Code? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people have heard of Dev Color? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. If you don't know, you're about to find out in a second. Kamilah's amazing. She also has been a part of Tech Beach, which is you'll learn more about today, but she also was at LinkedIn for 6 years. She built their mobile app. So obviously workforce development is something that she's very familiar with. She also worked with me at a company called Hustle. She runs her own company called Sway and has worked at several startups across the board. She's the one that got us featured, the Breaking Stars podcast featured in the Apple App Store, in addition to a bunch of things she's done on whitewater rafting trips with us. So we're really grateful to have her here with you to not just share a story, but answer your questions. And yeah, welcome, Kamilah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is amazing. There's so many people on the call. I'm super excited.
Yeah. And as we know, we have a large community of people who are outside of tech. They're looking to break in, and majority of them are learning how to code. So maybe you can just share your story of how did you get started, and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what were you doing when you were growing up?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. My story starts in Jamaica, so I'm originally from Jamaica, and I moved back and forth between Jamaica and the US a couple of times growing up. So I actually also lived in Atlanta for 7 years, middle school and high school there. I was lucky in that my dad is actually a computer science professor. And so we actually had a lot of both me and my sister is also a software engineer now, and both of us had that exposure to tech growing up. And so that was super fortunate for us. Interestingly, the first time I coded was actually in school in Jamaica. They had this language called what's the one with the triangle? I forget the name of this. Logo. It was supposed to be like a turtle, and you give it instructions and stuff. And this was in 4th grade. We had some teacher in my school in Jamaica who was really enthusiastic about it. So I got pretty early exposure, but I didn't really get interested in pursuing it until high school, I want to say. So I got this robotics kit. I actually have one of them up here, Lego Mindstorms.
Yeah.
And so I got one for Christmas or something, or maybe a birthday, and I got really into it. And I was like, all right, this kit is going to be my ticket out of having to do all these other science fair projects. I'm totally just going to build robots with this instead of having to do all these other BS projects that are always failing on me, because I was really bad at biology. I was not that great with chemistry out there. It was okay, but the projects, I was just really not good with my science fair projects for those. And so it's okay, this is totally going to be easier. I'm going to build a walking robot. And of course it wasn't easier, right? It's completely ridiculous, but I was still really hooked. And so that's what got me interested in it. And then I also did AP computer science in high school. And so it's funny because people at this point, they're like, oh, okay, cool. You're a total textbook thing. You started coding in high school. But I still didn't think for sure that I was actually going to do computer science. Surprise, surprise, there weren't that many girls doing this. We lucked out in my school, in my class for AP computer science. We actually had a bunch of girls. And so we kind of gave each other support. One of my friends was in the other AP computer science class, and she was the only girl, and she got picked on mercilessly by the guys. But we sort of had our community and gave each other support, but it was still kind of rough. And by and large, a lot of the guys who were the worst bullies of us girls who are interested in science and tech and stuff were the computer science guys. They were like the ones who like were hacking into the school library or something and thought they were like really big shots. And I still remember one of them told this girl that she only got into Yale because of affirmative action. And so I had this really concern that like I was going to go into college and maybe like everybody who did computer science were like these assholes who were like who were into it in school. So I almost, because, high school, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Am I going to multiply this by 100 and it's going to be 100 of these dudes when I go to college? Maybe I don't want to do this. So I really kind of considered not doing it for a while, despite being like I think I got like one of the top scorers in AP computer science in my school. But I decided to go through with it. And that's what I studied in college. I actually went to college in Jamaica. This is back in 2003. And so after September 11th, that was when a lot of the like immigration laws started to get a little bit more stringent / vicious, and I started getting really irritated. And I was also in the South, and all these like Confederate flags started going up everywhere. And I had this moment of, I'm done with this. I would just like to be in my own country, with Black people for a while. And so I moved back to Jamaica and I went to college. And that's how I ended up there for 4 years. It was amazing. It was really great to just sort of like be able to be in the space without dealing with all of the other stuff. I eventually moved back to the US and went to grad school in Illinois. Was going to be doing a PhD, dropped out of the PhD, but did a master's. That was actually in robotics, and then started working at Wolfram. And that's basically like my path into tech.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say for people who are just getting started, I know in the introduction, Ruben mentioned that you spent a lot of time at LinkedIn the iOS app. Can you talk about what does the role of a software engineer actually entail, and if there's any difference between being a software engineer and working on a mobile app?
Yeah. Okay. I would say not that much of a difference. And when I started at LinkedIn, I wasn't working on mobile. I didn't know any mobile at all, actually. I started working on mobile at LinkedIn maybe about 8 months into my role as a software engineer there. And it was basically a conversation with my manager where he like listed out a bunch of projects coming up. And I said, I like Apple. I'd like to work on this new iOS app. And he said, great. I think mobile is going to be really big for LinkedIn soon. I was like, okay, cool. And then I just like bought a bunch of books like on my Kindle and started like reading about like iOS development by night and working on the app by day. So it was really it was completely random that I even ended up like working on it. But it did end up being really good because when I started working on iOS at LinkedIn, there were maybe like 5 or 10, maybe max like mobile developers at LinkedIn. It was pretty small back in those days. So I ended up getting to be early on. Differences, I would say, is that when you're doing mobile development, it tends to be a little bit more platform specific. So you have to, I would say like the people, like many of the people who are like the best at like iOS or Android, they have very deep knowledge about the platform and they keep up with the changes. Like everyone sees like, Apple hosting these conferences, right? And like Google hosting their conferences every year. And that always has fallout for the rest of us who are actually building the products to work on it. And so you have to like very actively keep up with the latest of the tech, and it changes a lot. And it's still pretty young, right? It's 11 years now since Steve Jobs announced the first iPhone. So they're very young platforms. And even like the language that we're developing in for iOS, Swift, right? That's even younger, right? That's since 2015, I think. And so everything changes a lot because everything is so young. And I think that makes it maybe a little bit different than, for instance, if you're developing, say like in the mid-tier of the stack, which is what I was doing when I first started at LinkedIn, and I was working in Java, and Java is a very old and established language, and like not that much is changing year to year with Java or with the basics of like, this is how you deliver data to a website or a mobile app. And so some of that is just, it doesn't change as much necessarily as it does for mobile.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Something that I think is important to point out, that if people didn't catch it, is even though you're working as a software engineer, you're always learning. So
you're always learning, absolutely. And you have to be able to be like flexible to like pick up new like platforms and new technologies. Even if you're, and in some ways, I think maybe even gets harder the further up you go and the longer you go, especially if you're not coding, because you still need to have that familiarity with all the like technologies that are changing, but you're not necessarily doing the like hands-on engineering as you were earlier in your career. So in some ways it can take more work.
There's a lot of people on the call that have jobs that are also learning part-time.
Yeah.
That like, since you were working and then you never worked in mobile before, you had to teach yourself through books at night. How did you manage your schedule to perform and deliver on your current job while you were learning the new skills to be able to perform while you were working?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think people debate a lot about, like what the value of a computer science education is. And I think if you get a really, really good one, the value is teaching you exactly that. How can you know, like, these are like the problems, and being able to be flexible and pick up new languages and apply them to it. And I think that's basically that skill set that I developed, and the skill set that I think is like the most important for anyone like getting into tech is being able to manage that. So I mean, I don't know. I just sort of went through with it, asked a lot of questions, and then I'd be like really observant for like more senior engineers on the team when I'd see them do stuff where if I found myself like running into the same problem over and over again and I went to help, I'd like observe them as they figured out what the problem was to figure out like what was the difference. Like, oh, okay, I see. I needed to like set these breakpoints, or like this is probably how I can figure out like what's working with my code. And so I would just observe like the more senior engineers a lot, and then continuously like read
about the dynamic of when let's say someone junior just gets their first job in tech.
Yeah.
What is the dynamic of your interaction with someone senior, like a tech lead or your manager on the team, in terms of how the work gets distributed to you? And if you get stuck, what kind of support do junior people usually get to bring them up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you land in a very functional thing, and this can go bad, and often it goes bad. But hopefully you end up in a very functional situation where you do have someone where you can ask that questions. And if you don't have that immediately, then you should ask for that, right? And you should ask your manager, like, hey, is there someone like a mentor, or someone I can pair with, or someone who can be assigned to me, like who I can ask questions as I have trouble. And that person probably, they won't necessarily be your manager. It depends on the team and the project, but more likely it will be like someone who's more senior on your team. That you know that you can go to that person and ask questions. And then I think just the biggest thing with that, like to make this a working partnership, is to do a combination of trying to solve it yourself, and then when you reach that roadblock where you can't, don't wait too long, which I often do because I want to solve it myself. So don't wait too long. Ask the questions, but then also really pay attention to like the process of how they like figured out what was wrong with your code, because that's like how I feel like the biggest difference between like a junior engineer and a software engineer is knowing how to debug your code and figure out like what's going wrong, right? Like it's one of the biggest and the first skills that you have to learn.
Can you repeat that one more time?
The biggest difference between like a junior software engineer and a software engineer is just learning how to debug your code. Yeah. And how to, like, when something goes wrong, figuring out the right like places in the code to look for, like the right search terms to look for, or even like the right question to ask about it to get yourself like unstuck. Even noticing when there's like, sometimes you look at something, you're like, well, this can't be me. Let me see if this is happening to anybody else. And probably it is happening, or somebody has seen the exact same problem before and they can explain to you like why this is happening.
Yeah. Very cool. So
I was just gonna say, as she keeps talking, as Teamwork keeps talking, good questions to ask, because that's going to be very important. We want to get into the practice of asking good questions.
Yeah, and we're about to open it up for all of you. The question I have talked about, like, how do you get yourself unstuck by asking questions, and we talked about like the software engineer's role in terms of a software engineer versus a mobile engineer. For some of the folks who are very new to coding, can you kind of break down what does a software engineer even do in like layman terms? What type of problems do you solve? What does that work entail?
Yeah, so when you think about any sort of software project, there's a couple of different main roles, right? There's a software engineer, there's someone in a sort of design / product role, probably. There's someone managing that things like happen together. Sometimes it's called like a project manager. And so you have to have like people sort of like fulfilling these different things, like what are you building and what does it look like? And then how do you build it? And how do we make sure everything's coordinated and like happens on time? And as a software engineer, you're the person, you're figuring out the like how you build it and then actually building it. And that can vary depending on the project a lot and like what your platform is, what exactly you're doing. And so I would say like you're really, when you think of what as a software engineer does, I really like to think of it as like, how does it fit into like that other picture of like what everybody else is doing, right? So for example, if I get like I get a new feature to build, and I may look at this new feature. Let's say, for example, let me pick one from LinkedIn. So I get a feature to build, and it's messaging, and I need to make our messaging look like a chat. And so I'm like, okay, well, what does this look like? And I may go to the designer and they may give me a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, okay, great. And I may look at the requirements again. And I'm like, okay, well, before we used to get the data looking like this, but now we need data looking like this. And so at that point, depending on where I am, what type of software engineering role I'm doing, I may now need to like go and talk to like some other people. So if I'm doing mobile, then maybe I need to talk to the backend software engineers and say, hey, I know you guys used to give us data that looked like this, right? And maybe it had just like the message body and the title. But now I also need to know like what thread this message belongs to. I need this extra piece of data with it. And then the backend software engineers will say, okay, great. We're going to figure out how we can get that to you, and then we'll get back to you, right? Or it could be, I might go to the product manager and say, hey, I noticed that you want us to surface all these names of people, but that's going to be really expensive. And they'll say, okay, let's see if we can figure out like a different way to do this, or do we actually need this? And then after all of that, and after you've figured out like how all of this can work together, then you actually do the coding, right? But there's like a lot of other stuff that you're doing before you even get to just like sitting behind a computer and writing some code and like making something look like something. There's like, and you really have to, I think, get yourself out of like, this is just like, I'm just going to write code. It's never going to be, you're just going to write code. There has to be some interfacing with like other people on your team.
Yeah. Before opening it up for, thank you for that. Before opening it up for questions, can you talk to people a little bit about Def Color, Black Girls Code, Tech Beach? I know Def Color has like squads and mentors, and I know what happens in the squad stays in the squad, but I think like it'd be helpful to like share some insights so people can aspire to understand how the ecosystem works.
Yeah, so Def Colors is organization for Black software engineers and software engineering managers, and it was started by someone who was a software engineer, McKinsey, and he worked at like Pinterest and Facebook. And his problem that he was trying to solve was that it was really hard for him to like find that network of other Black software engineers and talk with them about things happening in his career, and maybe even like figuring out how to help people and maybe get help himself, right? Just that sort of hidden network. And often when you're at a company, you're like one of a few, right? You know, when I joined LinkedIn, I was like the only Black woman software engineer for probably the majority of my time there. And so you're very often like one of the few, one of the only, definitely probably one of the only on your team. And so that was the thing he was trying to solve. And so it's this organization where you apply to join, and when you do the application, I think you have to fill out a bunch of stuff around like your career goals, what you've done so far, like what you aspire to do. And the key there is that they're really looking for people who are trying to, who I guess are, I mean, kind of like they're the type A people, right? People who are, they really are very focused on like, these are goals that they have in their career and they really want to like hit these goals. And those are the people that they're trying to get into the organization. Once they do that, they create these squads. Squads are usually they're either around 50-50 gender parity or all male, but you're never like the only woman on your squad. And you meet once a month with your squad. It's around like maybe like 8 or 9 people. You'll meet usually from my squad. They come to my house. So my house is like the meeting place for it. And you go over like your goals, and then usually there's one person who's assigned to talk for that meeting. And they bring up something that's going on in their career. For example, I just found out that I'm being underpaid, and I'm really mad, and I'm trying to figure out what is the right way to like make sure like to like get the right pay. Or I think I'm being like really disrespected on my team, and there's this person who keeps like changing the code. Or like I'm having this like I'm trying to like interview for a new role, and I'm not sure like what is the right like thing to be looking for, right? I'm trying to figure out like what is the right next place. And so these are all sort of anonymized examples of things that people chat about. Or, oh, this is a good one recently, right? I'm working at a startup, and there's not them, and I noticed that we're not interviewing any Black people, and I really want to make sure early on, since I'm at this startup, that we are hiring Black people. So it ends up being really good, because there are a couple of things that happen. One is you realize that you're not going crazy. Like for every time when you bring something up, right, you're like, oh, I'm being really underpaid. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I know when that happened to me. Yep. Real. That's totally real. Right. Or like, I'm like fighting some like politics thing. And people are like, yep, that's a thing. Yeah, we know. And then they also share stories, and Dev Color is really big on not just giving advice. You're supposed to share a story of something similar, and everybody's just sharing stories about like similar things that happen, and then you can like extract out value from those things. So yeah, it's a really great community. I don't think I really knew many Black software engineers in the Bay until I joined it, and so for that alone, it's been like super valuable. And then let's see, you asked about Black Girls Code and Tech Beach. Black Girls Code started by Kimberly Bryant, and that's an organization where they reach out to girls who are like, I don't think it's a full K through 12. They might start around like 8 or 9 or so. I don't remember how young they start, but basically it's for Black and Latina girls. I think they also do outreach with Latina girls, and they'll do these different workshops. Like they have like robotics ones, or they'll do like build a website in a day. They do like summer programs, and that's really great. I think when Kimberly started it, again, it was inspired by her daughter. Her daughter is like the only person in some summer camp, and she was like, well, this isn't great. And the only Black girl in the summer camp. So that's a really great organization. One of the interesting things about volunteering there is that you also meet other Black people who are working in tech, like as mentors, as kind of an unexpected benefit. So I've made friends from other people who are mentoring there too. So that's really great. And the other good thing is that the girls are just like so unencumbered by like the weight that we all have from just being older. So they're just like very free about things, like the sky is the limit. They like don't know yet like this sort of like BS that's gonna come. And so that can be like really refreshing to see. And then Tech Beach is a tech conference held in Jamaica. We just had our 3rd year. I'm one of the advisors. And that one was started by this guy named Kirk, and he got inspired. So he's from Jamaica, and the 2 co-founders, one is from Jamaica, Kirk, and then Kyle is from Trinidad and Tobago. And Kirk was at a tech conference in like Ireland. It was like really cold and rainy and miserable. And someone went up to him. They were like, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, "Oh, you're from Jamaica? Well, we should all be in Jamaica. Why are we here in Ireland?" Kirk was like, "Why aren't we here in Ireland?" Sorry, we should all be in Jamaica. And he's like, why aren't we all in Jamaica? And so I met Kirk like in January of 2016, I think. And he like pitched this idea to me. And I was like, yes, I would like there to be a tech conference in Jamaica. What can I do to help you make this happen? And so they had their first year that same year in November of 2016. And it's been really great. I think in our second year, we had Jack Dorsey as a keynote speaker, which was pretty awesome. And this last year, I think, is actually the best year. Just had a really great lineup of people, including a lot of like Black people in the Bay. Arkway Harris, who's like a director of engineering at Slack, she was there. It was really awesome group of people.
That's really cool. So thanks a lot for sharing all of this information.
Yeah.
I want to open it up for people in the community to ask the questions. You need to unmute yourself. And then if your microphone doesn't work, you can also write the question in the chat. But feel free to go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
Hey, Kamilah, how you doing?
Hi.
Hey, so I just wanted to know what was the thing that made you stay at LinkedIn for as long as you did?
Sure. There are a couple of things. I had a really, really good time at LinkedIn. You know, like everywhere has their like ups and downs, but overall I would say that I was really able to grow myself a lot at LinkedIn. I came out like a completely different person with a completely different like skill set. Made a lot of amazing friends. You know, like your roommate, she used to work at LinkedIn. So my best friends, I met them all through LinkedIn. And every time I started to feel bored, I was always able to find some new project or team or a new thing to work on and to sort of like stretch myself more. And so I kept staying there until I felt like I was ready to leave. Like there was some moment where I was like, I think I'm done. I don't really see like another thing that I want to do at LinkedIn right now. And I love my current team, but I just felt done at some point. It was just like, okay, I'm ready. I'm good.
Yeah.
So yeah. Plus, and then there's like a second part to it too, is that I also got my green card while I was at LinkedIn. And so I definitely probably stayed. It gave a little bit more of a, I should stay and make sure that I get this.
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Yeah.
But even after I got it, I stayed for like another year and a half. So yeah.
Oh, okay. That's great. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool.
I also have a question. So when I was signing up for my my boot camp, I was questioning which full-time boot camp I should go to because there was multiple. There was one for web development, one for UI, and one for other thing. I forgot the other one, but I don't know what's the best field that I should go into as somebody who's just trying to get into the field right now.
I mean, they're all good skill sets to have. I think it's much more which one do you think you will like, I don't know, feel the most engaged in doing, right? So like I said, I started off working on the main stack, but I really like mobile. Every time I've like dabbled in something else, I'm like, no, I think I still prefer like mobile development as like my main thing. And that's just something that I found through trial and error. I think that if you, even for doing a boot camp, even if you're doing the training in a specific skill, you can you always transition to another one once you started working, right? So say like you picked like UI and then you get to your first job and you're working there for a while and you're like, actually, I think I'd like to do mobile development. Then you can transition to mobile development. It's usually pretty fluid within tech companies to switch from one thing to the other, unless there's like a huge amount of like assumed skills that you're supposed to come in, for example, maybe like machine learning or something like that, or data engineering. Sometimes like those can be a little bit harder to like transition to, but in general, for others, it's not that hard to switch from one to the other if you'd like to.
what would you say is the one that's most in demand right now in the job field?
I mean, I think both mobile and web are pretty in demand. And then probably also like machine learning or data engineering. Those are probably the top three that I would see, or top three that I think take a while to fill in terms of positions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good questions. Anyone else? We'll start reading. Yeah, go ahead.
So, hello, my name is Gregory. I'm interested in web development and mobile development. I eventually want to transition into mobile development and do freelancing thing. What would be your advice as a professional who's been in the field and going through the ranks for someone just starting in the field? What do you think they should focus on in school and coming out of school who wants to take the path of, getting into mobile development?
Well, I think if you want to get into mobile development, then you should just focus on maybe like working on some side projects earlier, like in school, and getting that in and seeing if you can get an entry-level position into mobile. A lot of times for tech companies, if you start out in mobile, it can be a lot. It can sometimes be easier, and especially if your eventual goal is to freelance, then the more years of experience you have within the platform, the easier it will be to freelance for that platform, right? So right now it's like not that hard for me to freelance for mobile development because I have so many years experience in mobile development, and it makes it easier for me myself. And like I'm more able to be of more use to like the company because of that, right? And so I think if that really is your ultimate goal, then you should just focus on the mobile side instead of the dabbling between like the mobile and the web.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I have all the basic web development technologies under my belt, just in case I have to flip from side to side.
I mean, absolutely, and it's very useful for you to have that. They have a lot in common. I mean, mobile and web development, they're both still development for like the clients as opposed to the server, and so there's a lot of overlap between them. And if you are like versed in both of those, that can also make you a stronger candidate.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would also add that the coding bootcamps that might focus on iOS or Android, or even web, they all cover what does it take to set up a server, like how do you set up a database. So if you're learning, and I think we have a few people on the call here who are actually learning iOS at a bootcamp. So I'd love for Jarek, if you're still on the call, do you mind sharing the technologies that you're learning as an iOS developer? I don't know if Jarek is still on here. We're getting a lot of people joining. But basically, you are going to learn a backend language, and you are going to learn a front-end language regardless whether you're doing web or iOS or Android.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Let me read. There's two questions in the chat. They're somewhat similar. Basically, like as a software engineer who needs to learn a new technology, there's so many things out there. How do you like keep your edge, and how do you keep your focus on a single technology?
Yeah, so I think if you're trying to maintain a specific focus in the technology, then I think just like knowing what to focus in, and also like keeping up with like industry news around things and actually trying out things. There's a couple of different things I did. Like last year for a while I did like it was like a distributed systems like reading group where we were going through a book. It was like me and a couple other like iOS engineers, right? And so there's still a lot of like self-learning or like learning with groups that I try to like work on to like keep myself fresh, right? Or like right now, like, I'm working with this company, Crikey, and they make like an AR app. And so that's been really great for me because I'm now also like getting experience, and now it makes it reality. It's like another thing, right? Or if I'm like working on something, it's like HealthKit, and I'm like, great, I would also like to learn that technology. And all of those things just like paying attention to those things and like at least trying them out so you understand. And maybe for some of those things, you'll be like, yes, I really love working with this. This is like my platform. Maybe not, but at least you would have had that experience. So I think just like, yeah, that's the big thing for me is this, I really try to keep myself, I guess, like stay curious and keep yourself sort of like trying out all of these new things. I learn better from doing than reading, right? So I don't think I really understood what it took to like build an AR app until I was actually working on an AR app, right? Or like what it takes to like set up an iOS app from scratch until I actually did that. And so there's just like all these different things that you learn by doing.
Yeah.
I wanna hear more questions from the ladies, just because I think it's a very unique opportunity to have someone like Kamilah. I mean, she mentioned she's like the only Black woman engineer at LinkedIn, which is like huge multi-billion-dollar company. And it doesn't have to be super like bleeding hardish questions, but just like really take advantage of this moment to ask good questions from her, and the men as well. But just I think we need to hear more voices, or people could type it up if they don't want to talk. So.
Hi, yeah, I have a question. My name is Mayselina, and I just want to know, so how do you feel as a woman in tech? How easy is it to get into higher positions?
It does not come without its challenges, for sure. And I think the hardest thing about it is that nothing is ever, many times things are like not explicit. So you might get a lot of times where you're like, is it like me? Maybe it's me, right? But it's doable. I think a couple of things. One is sort of like building your own like sort of support network of other women in similar positions, and maybe even like women who are a little bit or ahead of you. Both of those things help a lot. I definitely have that a lot, where I have like my fellow friends who are like, they're women and they're like software engineers or engineering managers, or like they're building their own startup, right? Maybe they're a director of an engineering team, and it's good. And I also do some amounts of like mentorship as well, where I might have like a mentee who's like earlier on starting. And I think really maintaining that network of people at all different stages helps me a lot, even in figuring out like how I can get to the next stage and how I'm also like helping other people along the way. So, but it comes with challenges. You have to be resilient, for sure. Lots and lots of resilience.
Definitely. Thank you so much for the advice.
Yeah. I also recently, I did recently do my first session with an executive coach, and that was like life-changing for me. And so I think if you can at some point, like that is also a really great resource.
Yeah, we're actually going to be dropping an episode with the CEO of a company called Torch, which is an executive coaching company, so you all can get a lot of insight around that.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I bring up the demographics and the opportunity is because look at this call. Look at every single person on this list. Look at yourselves that have your cameras turned on. Literally within the next 6 to 9 months, you all can literally completely change or increase numbers by 100% with the people on this call alone at multiple large tech companies, because all 50 of you all on the call can literally do this by September. I mean, my brother started this time last year and got a job in September, so you all can all do this. So like, think about like adding these different keys to your game plan as you all are asking different questions.
Yeah. I wanna also read a question from Angelique in the chat. So she said she asked about the work-life balance, especially as a woman in tech.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely shifted. I burned out a couple of times, at least twice, I would say so far. This last year, I think, has probably been my best in terms of rolling back my hours and actually figuring out like what are the number of hours that I can do to like still feel like really just like happy, right? And that helps me a lot. I think for everyone, they figure out like what is that thing that helps them feel balanced or happy. And it's, you know, it can be like the most random thing. Like, I think last year at some point I finally gave up and was like, okay, my room being messy is going to be bugging me, and I hate like spending money on this. But if I spend money on having a cleaner come in here every like 2 weeks, I will feel a lot happier. And like just that like small amount of like investment in it, like completely changed like my mood. And so I think just like figuring out what are the things where you can give away, you know, where I'm like, oh, I know I could do this cleaning, but also if I do this, I'll be like much more productive in general and much happier. And that will lead to me like being able to do better and execute more on like other parts of my life and not like having to like think about that. So that's been a big thing for me, is figuring out like, what are those things where I have to like let go in order to be able to do more and to execute more.
Omar asked a question about his background in Python, and whether it looks bad if you primarily work with one language or if you recommend other languages. I know you covered some things about languages, but maybe talk about portfolio construction, you know, the level of experience you have, and like how to tell a story if you might have like a singular focus when it comes to language historically.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily bad, but it can potentially be limiting. So for my advice for that would be, if you feel worried about it, you have sort of like two main options. One is still make sure that you're really excellent at that language that you have, and that you feel like you're mastering that more and more. And then at some point you get a job in that area, then look around to see if there are ways for you to find a new project within this company where you're learning a new language. So, and then the second option for that would be to take on a side project, an extra project where you're learning a new language again, so you can add that. Both are totally valid. One of them means that you're getting paid to learn a new language, right? Like if you do this within your job versus doing a side project. And people are always talking about side projects, but it takes time, right? And if you have like a family or other things, like you might not have that time to be like coding like at night or on the side. That I fully like recognize that. And so that's why I think often it can be easier if you just double down on that one language, and then within your job, like then see if you can transition to a new one.
Yeah. Do you have any? There's a few questions. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'll kind of combine them. So.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for people who are going through boot camps? And then, like, how do you prepare? Like, how do you create your portfolio so then they can also apply to companies like LinkedIn and be ready for that interview process?
Advice in terms of how to get a job,
or what's your general advice for people in coding boot camps? And then I guess the separate question that's a combination is like, how did you get the job? Was it through a referral?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I think for coding boot camps, there may be a couple. If you have a coding boot camp where they help you with job placement, I would say, and if you're looking and evaluating, I think that's really, really important. It just makes such a big difference. Otherwise, you can sometimes be left out a little bit in the cold. However, there are a couple of companies that are specifically will have like paths in for bootcamp students. Pinterest is one of them, right? They have a path in for bootcamps. LinkedIn also has one as well too. So tech companies are more and more like creating paths in where they're like designed for bootcamp programs. And I know there are a lot of even like startups, etc., who are starting to like catch on to this and are also like looking for bootcamp graduates as entry level engineers. It'll just like, again, it will take some doing. I think the tech industry, one of my biggest frustrations is that they can be a little bit unforgiving to junior engineers and people starting out, and so it takes a little bit like to like get that foot in the door. And then, did I get a referral at LinkedIn? I did, yes. there was someone that I'd gone to school with in Illinois who was working at LinkedIn at the time, and I ran into her at a wedding, and she said she likes LinkedIn. And a couple months later, I was looking to move from Illinois to the Bay Area, and so I like messaged her, and I think she like referred me in.
And we always say this on the podcast, but most jobs are not found online. They're found through some sort of referral, whether it's someone you previously went to school with, or even being proactive and reaching out to podcast guests or people that are in tech. You can position yourself to add value to them before you're even in tech. So when you do have the skills, you can tap into those relationships that will help you at least get noticed by the hiring managers, and that will translate into interviews.
Absolutely. I think all of the jobs that I've had have been through some kind of referral. Even like I mentioned, the AR startup, Crikey, I found out about them because I was talking to a friend, and she had had a bunch of iOS clients, and she was like, oh, there's this startup, but they seem really great, but I'm not going to be able to take them on as a client because I'm moving to New York. And that's how I like met her. And she had also found them through a referral, through an intro to someone, right? And so there's this chain of referrals that happens. And so a big thing, actually, here's a second thing. Besides looking for tech companies that have specific programs for bootcamp graduates, I think also actively trying to build your network within the tech industry is a really big thing, and a really big way to get your foot in. And that can be through meetups, it can be through tech conferences, right? There's like Afrotech, for instance. DevColor also has a conference, DevColor in Motion, and there's lots of smaller meetups. And so if you have, like for instance, someone mentioned Python, there are all these different like Python communities, right? And they have like meetups and conferences, and so you go to those, you can build up that like community. Even with iOS, I went through enough like meetups and like conferences and stuff that I got an invite into like this like iOS developers only Slack, and there are a lot of iOS people like in Slack. Like there's so many like referrals and like job postings that go down in this, like that the reading group that I talked about, that happened in that like group. So there are a lot of like hidden like networks that happen, and you have to get your way in.
So related to that, you're actually more active on Twitter than a lot of us. So can you talk a little bit about how you've used Twitter to build out your network, why you use Twitter, how personal brand has played a factor in your career, and shout out your Twitter name so people can tweet about how much they love your conversation.
I guess I have been. I was sort of fish early on Twitter. I remember I joined back in like maybe 2006 or something. I was like listening to a podcast, and I kept hearing them talk about this weird thing. And so I've been on it for a while. And how I've used it has definitely changed a lot over the years. And I think what happened was when I moved to the Bay Area, I started using Twitter more at events, and usually at like a meetup or these like different things, right? Girl Geek dinners, etc. There'll be some like hashtag. And so I would use it on those, and I would find other people from that basically. And, you'd all like follow each other. And so I just like built a sort of network from that. The second thing that happened, and this is one of the things I think about when people ask like, oh, you like stayed at LinkedIn a long time. They actually allowed me to get like a fairly nice like platform and like starting to like give public talks. And it wasn't so much that they pushed me into it. I think there was some sense of me like taking this on myself. At some point I just started finding the things on my own. But they still gave me that opportunity, and maybe not every tech company would have been as open to me talking about this stuff. And I gave a bunch of talks on like LinkedIn things. And so it was part initiative of my own, and part LinkedIn giving me a little bit of that space as well to give talks on their behalf. And if you think about like the different ways people are treated within the tech industry, there are some times when I look back and I'm like, I feel like if I'd been a white dude, LinkedIn would have been pushing me to do more of these. And at some point, like some of the other iOS engineers, they were like, wait, you're talking at this tech conference? How did you get in? And like, they reached out to me and they're like, wait, what? And so it was all on, it wasn't necessarily through LinkedIn. It started happening on my own. But they, they still gave me that space. So there was some of that too. And I think that kind of helped me in terms of the building the brand, because I started giving more talks, doing more public speaking.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Cool. And for everyone who's on the call, I shared Kamilah's Twitter in the chat, and please tweet at her. This is your way to start already building up your own brand, and make sure to use New Year, New Career hashtag and tag Career Karma in it. But I want to ask, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to ask a question from the chat, which is very important. Brittany asked it, and Brittany, thanks for being very transparent with some of the things you're struggling with. Basically, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this. There's all these goals that you set for yourself, and you know that you should be kind of putting in the time and learning and practicing and doing drills and learning how to code. But sometimes our human nature kicks in, and we don't make the learning deposit into learning these skills. So what advice do you have for people who are just starting out and are trying to figure out how to learn and how to keep themselves accountable?
Interesting. So yeah, that's super interesting. Let me see. I think that again, for me, I learn concepts very much by doing. That's one thing. But the second thing is that I often also, like, the longer you're in the field and the longer you're doing things, you get more levels of understanding of it. For example, there are things that I did or wrote code for back in 2013 at LinkedIn that now, if I think back at it, I have a much greater understanding of what it is that we were doing and building. And that's just something that comes with time and with a greater understanding of it. And so it's basically, it's not like you're normal. It's totally normal to feel like you have a more shallow understanding of something at first, and it comes with time. It comes, it's like with any skill, right? I know, Ruben, like you play a musical instrument, I play piano, and like 100%, it's just the hours, right? Back when I was like spending many hours a day practicing piano, I got the results, right? Like you saw, and like the more hours you put in, the more the results you see. And it's not so much that like I was necessarily more skilled than anyone. I was just putting in more hours, and like over time you start to like reap those rewards, and you start to like understand things more. And it's very similar for programming. You just like with time, over time, you'll get more of that understanding.
Yes. Yeah. Shout out to all the musician hustlers.
Yeah. So we're about to start wrapping up. There's a bunch of questions in the chat, and we'll see if we have time to get to it. But what is your opinion, or what advice do you have for people struggling with the imposter syndrome? We always ask our guests that question.
Well, many of us, especially from underrepresented minority groups, or et cetera, like probably all suffered, or many of us have suffered from this or had experienced this phenomenon at some point. I think what can help is, or at least what helped for me, was actually helping others. And so the moment I started helping others learn the thing that I was working on, for example, I started helping people learn how to like do mobile and create mobile apps. I started to think, well, I must be better at this than I thought I was, because I've now been able to pass on this skill to someone else. And it also helped me understand it a little bit more, because I had to teach it to someone, right? And so for me, that's what has always helped me, is if I try to like explain things, even with giving talks, that also helps a lot, because the process of trying to figure out how to explain something to someone means that I have a better understanding of it. And so that's what works for me. I mean, everybody has to find like what works for them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in public. Like I said, this is even like with one-on-one, or like volunteering at like a hackathon or something, just like working with someone. There's always someone who's further behind than you are, and helping them learn something can help you understand it more and start to like reevaluate your own skill set and realize that you know more than you probably think you do.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so Elliot asked a question. So he's one of the most active people in the Career Karma community. He tweets a lot. Interesting because like on the Career Karma calls, he's actually the minority, even though he's a white male, because you can see the demographics here. And so he asked a question where he was recently at a meetup where a minority woman felt attacked by a group of predominantly white males on the call, and she ended up leaving the call and didn't return. So he felt bad about it and wanted to know what he could do to prevent that situation for her. So what can white males do? Or what are your thoughts on how white males have been negative or positive during your career?
I mean, it's an accommodation. My mentor at LinkedIn, when I eventually, this is another, if I had to find this myself, but my eventual mentor at LinkedIn was a white man. And so I think there's definitely like positives and negatives that you can find. And actually, probably one of my worst managers was a woman. And so there's definitely some amount of like, you can get both help and harm from all these groups of people. But my one wish would be that when you see something happening like this and you are in a position of privilege is to speak out and say something. So I'll never forget when I was in this meeting where my manager at the time said, oh yeah, well, of course we want to like increase the diversity of the team, but we don't want to like lower the bar. And I was so mad. And I had already spoken up at least once in a meeting about diversity. And so at that point I was just like pissed. And I was like, why does it have to be me again? Right? Like the one black woman in this room, the one woman in the room, why do I have to be the person to bring this up again? Oh, I saw you're really upset. That's a really crappy thing they said in the meeting. And I just had this thought of like, then why didn't you say something when you're in the room? Like you were a dude in the room. I was the only woman in the room. Any of you who saw that I was like visibly frustrated with this statement could have said something and they didn't. And so I think that's like a really, really big thing. It's just speak up, right? Like you often will have no like fallout from saying something in those situations where as you said, like this person, maybe she left or like you just don't say something, you like soak it up. And it's like another one of those like tiny cuts or large cuts that you like absorb. And for me, that like when that manager said, that was like one of my last straws with that manager. It's just like, I'm over you. Like, this is it. Like, I'm not going to like work. I can't work for someone who thinks like this, right? And who like feels comfortable with saying this. And so any of those people, if they had spoken up, maybe that would have shifted that. And maybe that would have changed my mind even for that team.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got one more question from Darren, who is in the military currently. So Darren, thanks for serving this country. We appreciate your hard work. We're actually at the Travis Air Force Base in December, and we want to help more people from the military transition into tech roles. So your question is about basically you feel like you have the skills to be a project manager, and the people that you speak with, they're like, hey, become a project manager first and then go into software engineering. But you're, so let me read the question. So I've been told that some software engineers eventually go into project management. Have you seen project managers do vice versa?
I don't think I've seen any project managers go to software engineering. I have had friends who are software engineers transition to project managers. I think that reverse transition, I think that transition is a little harder. It's possible, especially if you have a company that's very big on like career transformations, transitions, right? Or if you have or if you're working at a smaller company where there's more room for that, where they just like need people to do things. In both of those cases, that will be easier. But in general, I would say yes, it's harder to transition project manager to software engineer than software engineer to project manager.
And I would add that basically, like, I would say it's possible, but you would have to leave the company if you're a project manager and you want to learn how to code and you want to become a software engineer. You can just leave the company and do a boot camp, or you can do a boot camp while you're at that company as a project manager. And then become a software engineer, but you have to ask yourself, what is your passion and what is your goal? Since you're leaving the military and you almost have a clean slate in front of you, if your goal is to become a software engineer, then go directly and do that. A lot of people think that there's like a lateral, like they'll spend 2 years working as a customer success person, and then that will somehow translate into being a different role at the company. Basically, go into the role that you're most passionate about, whatever it takes. If it takes you 6 months to acquire the skills, just go and do that, and you'll see how much more passionate you'll be doing that. And I don't know if you knew, but I actually worked as a project manager before I quit that job and became a software engineer. And I just realized when I was a project manager, I didn't like managing the process and telling people what to do. I wanted to do it myself. I didn't want to rely on other people. I wanted to do it myself. And you just have to ask yourself the same question: what do you like doing?
And the other thing too is like, if as a engineering manager, tech lead, like the further up you go in your software engineering career, the more project management skills will come in handy. And so even though you may have those project management skills now, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily go and use going into software engineering. If anything, it will give you like a hidden edge over other people who don't have that background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that a lot of people on the call weren't able to answer their questions. But again, it goes back to the power of Twitter. If you have private questions that are sensitive and you don't know about Twitter's DM feature, make sure you blow up Kamilah's DMs. But no, I think, Kamilah, you can speak for yourself whether you can those things. And I also think that before closing out, you should tell them about your Woman in Tech book in Amazon, because you're famous now.
Oh my God.
You're an author.
Yeah. So I guess two recent things. There's a Women in Tech book that came out a couple of years ago. One of the co-authors, I actually got that opportunity from Twitter. I reached out to the author. The book started on Kickstarter, and when my friend sent it to me, and I was like, wow, this seems great, but there's no like Black people in here or people earlier in their career. And so I just reached out to Tara and was like, hey, this seems really great, but it seems like you're missing people like Black people or people earlier in your career. P.S. if you're looking, I'll write the chapter. Just like thinking I was being ridiculous, but she actually responded to me. And we started talking, and we did like a hangout. And by the end of the day, I was like signed on to be like one of the co-authors. So that's how that happened. And yeah, it's on Amazon. It gets great reviews. I even know I have a couple of friends who were like, wow, I used it when I was applying for a job, and both like male and female who've been like, yeah, like this book has been really great. And then the other thing that I'm doing these days is I'm also working on this form of facilitate thoughtful conversation online. And so Sway, sorry?
It glitched a little bit. You said you're also working on what now?
On Sway, which is a platform to facilitate thoughtful conversation online. And so we started doing our beta testing for that last year. Got a really great response. And so we're going to be reopening that again this year.
Is it a mobile app? Or
it is a mobile app, yes. Okay. But we're also going to be working on web, like fast and furious, behind the iOS app. So yeah.
Awesome. We're about to start wrapping up. Maybe we can try something new that we haven't done before. Maybe people can unmute themselves and tell Kamilah how much they enjoyed the talk.
Yeah.
And thank you all for coming here, for joining tonight. Feel free to unmute yourself if you're muted, and just let us know.
Hey guys.
Hey. Had a good talk.
Thank you, Kamilah. Thank you, guys.
I was going to say.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great information.
Thank
you.
I was very informative.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Representation matters.
I'm gonna blow up your Twitter.
Yeah, I might be reaching out to you on LinkedIn.
All right.
All right. You're lucky this isn't the 1,000-person call yet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So many smiles.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank
Thanks, Kamilah. You did a great job.
Exit music.
Okay.
Awesome, everyone. Thanks for joining.
2019. Let's get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Later.
New year.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.